So you have a piece of paper with the schedule on it?
Yep, I will pull it out of my bag in 30 seconds.
Okay. You roll.
Oh, not that one.
Did you put the note well in there?
I did.
Okay. I didn't see that. And that's all I have mics.
Cool.
I'll give it 2 more minutes.
2 more minutes, okay.
Actually, I'm curious how that works. You get an actual Russian. Some real live Russians.
She said 2 minutes. Yeah, okay.
You're behind schedule.
I know. She said 2 minutes.
Who said?
Me.
2 minutes ago.
Okay. I think it's 4:21. We'll get rolling here. Hey, we were busy at 4:20. We're sorry. Welcome to session 1 of the 2 sessions for DNSOP. This is only an hour, and this session's is just going to cover what I call we call current working group business, stuff that's been adopted, stuff that we're kind of arguing about, things like that. I'm Tim. That's Suzanne. In case you haven't figured that out. Here's our note well. I know you've all seen this before, but please pay attention.
Note it well.
And note it well. And please fill out the blue sheets. It looks like we have a standing room only crowd. So obviously they're giving us a tiny room. Oh, that's right. It's because it's Dane. Never mind. So Dane, yeah. Dane's done, right? Yes, that's true. I always end up in the hallway at Dane. So tonight, some little agenda bashing this afternoon, some updates on our old work, and basically current working group business. And tomorrow, not tomorrow, but Friday, we're going to talk about possible new working group business. That's stuff that, you know, people have presented or people have submitted, and there's been some good discussion on the list about. And probably not new working group business, as I call it. We've been accused of scraping the ceiling of our charter by possibly bringing in work that may be out of scope. But, well, we can discuss that on Friday and sort of make directions on that. And then, of course, the thing we all been waiting for is the 6761 design team discussion at the end of the day on Friday. So I know you're all dying for that. So let's do some document updates. Since our last meeting in Yokohama, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, root loopback, DNS terminology, the 5966 biz update, queue name initialization, and this morning we got, okay, alert on TCP Keep Alive. So we've got 5 things published since Yokohama. I think that's pretty good. And we've, you know, and we thank you all for actually doing the work on doing the reviews, giving the feedbacks, working with the authors. And in the editor queue, Mark's draft on 6303, I found out from Iana, that's going to be published fairly soon. There's actually some process of pushing out zone files that's taken a while. So we were wondering what was going on there. Yeah, it's taken 6 months to push out some zone files. And EDNS chain query, that's in the editor queue as well. There's been some, mostly what's going on now is references. And I sat down on Monday with the editors and worked through some of the issues. And I think we have a lot of it cleaned up. Same thing for client subnet. I know there's been some comments about client subnet, some last minute things, and we can get those into the auth 48. The editors are very good with that. So David, I'll probably stay on top of you guys to make sure we get all that stuff sort of sorted out. Other stuff that's kind of sitting, the cookies draft, there was some IESG comments that Donald and I got lost in our discussion. He pushed out a new version, and I'm going to go back to the IESG folks and get them to release their ballot positions and move that one along as well. So there's two things that are currently sitting that the IP6 RDNS, is Lee in here? I'm not sure if Lee was here. We think this is ready for working group last call. We had a lot of discussion in Yokohama about it before we adopted it. And we think we're basically ready to sort of push that through, but it's been pretty quiet. So I'll bring this up probably on the list fairly soon. The next big one is Mark's no response draft. I do think it needs some more reviews and some more edits. And so I think we should start talking if anybody's interested, get people interested. I'll probably send out a note on the list about that. But before it does a last call, I want that one to get another cycle of reviews. Of course, all TLD is waiting. That may get freed up here fairly soon. So Warren, hopefully that'll make you happy. And the last three, there's stuff that we've adopted, but they're just in the need some work on. That's the 2317 biz update, Dave Crocker's attribute leaf document, which I think is pretty well done, but I definitely think we need to find some folks to sort of sign up to actually spend some time on it. And of course, the terminology biz draft that Paul's going to work on, and that's going to be basically just sort of sitting. I don't think they've actually done much on that. So, and there's other stuff. What are we working on? There we go. There's that. Now, I think I wanted Paul to talk about resolver priming shortly. Okay. You never sent me anything, but I think it's just some words you have to say. Just words.
And so it wasn't even worth the slide. So resolver priming, the draft has had some good comments in the last few months, but we have a bunch of open questions in the document and questions that we've asked on the list, and we aren't getting good response. We would like to get them because some of them are actually pretty big questions, such as what do you do when the RD bit is set to 1? Do you set the DO bit in EDS queries? We would like to get those resolved and then go to working group last call. But we're not ready to go to working group last call until those questions are done, because some of the answers to those questions might open up big issues. And let me just drop one in your brain that's not here, but I realized on the airplane coming over to Buenos Aires when you're sitting there waiting to land and stuff. So you go to your config to find out the root hints. You go and you get all of your NS records. After a few days or weeks, they start timing out, and so you need to get them again. And then the question is, where do you go to get them? Do you get them from your cache, where they are sitting, where you have answers, or do you go back to your config? So far, everyone I've asked has had a strong opinion, but agreed that the other one was just fine too. So that will come up on the list. What I'm saying is we need to discuss this more. It's not like, oh, we're almost done. There's plenty of meat there, but there's also some good questions. So please respond on the list, then we can go to working group last call.
All right, thanks. And the next couple of documents is Oliver's. There's 3 different things that are basically, one's ready to go, and the other 2 are right there in the pile. So.
Okay, thank you. This should be easy. I worked with a number of good people on this. I'm sorry I didn't put any of the names on here, but this one, roadblock avoidance, which is probably the oldest draft in the group at the moment. It should be done. We resolved the issue that came up during the last call. I pushed out a few versions in the last few weeks. This document just needs a little bit of textual fix-ups based on some comments I've got, and anybody who has spare time on the plane back, take a few minutes to read it and send me any textual updates, and I'll push a new version out that Tim can then send to IETF last call. Comment? Okay. Refuse any. Not much has happened since last time. There are two solutions that are still documented. One is to return randomly, semi-randomly, by choice, whatever, one RR set. And then there is the on-the-fly HINFO. Both are described in detail. This has been implemented. So yes, basically, there are a bunch of implementations. They have some been done thorough with a lot of thought. Other were done under attack. This seems to be useful. I would like a working group last call on this, along with request that along with my co-editors. Comments? Okay, nobody.
Pavadas, sorry. Are you suggesting both solutions should go into the document and we should do both?
Yes. The HINFO solution only works for DNSX signed zones when you do signing on the fly.
Okay.
HINFO can be used in unsigned zones also. But in the DNSX world, it only works if you do sign on the fly.
Okay.
So I think we'll do working group last call. I'll probably start that in a week or so, but we probably want to think about, do we want both solutions in there, which I'm not against that idea. So it's just sort of different alternatives.
I think there is no way around it.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Okay.
So.
The maintain DS documents, Tim started the last call on that
Saturday?
Saturday, an hour too early. I guess he was not drinking as much as that time. So we set a new version out just after the internet draft submission window opened up. I've already got a number of good comments on the list. Keep them coming. We need more reviews to pass, and should be easy. The companion document to this one is likely to be adopted by the Reg Extensions Working Group, and as John Levine explained there, this is an ugly hack, but it is the best possible alternative. Comments?
Yeah, actually, as a chair, I believe we had discussed informational versus proposed standard on this one. You and I think we went back and forth. Was this the one? Maybe not.
The prior document is informational, and my editor and I requested that this one be standards track and the other one be pulled up at the same time.
Okay, so
because we have had it out for a few years.
Yeah. So I think I'll probably send a note out to the list explaining all that. But you know, the idea behind this is not just making informational, but make it standards track. So this is definitely something a little more in depth there. So if anybody sees that that's a problem, they should sort of raise that flag and let us know, kind of thing. Oh, Shane.
Hello, Shane. Is this on?
No.
No.
I'll try again. Okay, there goes my singing career. Shane Kerr. So I guess my only concern with making this standards track is that I feel like the approach for adding a new DS is there's there's many options there, and it's not really very specific and clear. So I don't know.
Send text.
Okay, I'll discuss it on this then.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, I think.
If you want to suggest here.
Well, I mean, I think the document does a good job of talking about various different ways. I don't think there isn't today a good answer for a single straightforward way to do it. So
I don't think there is ever going to be a single acceptance criteria that people will use.
Right. So, well, okay. Well, we can discuss it on this. I know.
Please. Okay.
Cool. That was it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Ofer.
Definitely ahead.
Yeah, I know how to. Stefan, yeah. Yep, Stefan is going to talk about the NX domain cut, which I think has had some definite dissension on the list.
Yeah, some discussion.
Some discussion.
Okay. Recent news so on the next domain cut project. Before the adoption, there were a lot of discussions. So it was one of these drafts that were lucky enough to have many people reading it and commenting on it. It was 0.0 was published, and everything after that went quiet. And strangely enough, also good thing, 2 implementations were discovered. So there is already running code. Unbound and Power DNS already implements partially an domain cut, which is good. And draft 01 was published in March 2016, and suddenly other people read it. Apparently they didn't read it before, and there was 105 messages on the list. Again, if we want to show the IESG that many people read the draft and were interested in it, that's a good proof. So among all these discussions, it seems to me today that we have 4 lasting issues. So first one, because there have been a lot of discussions on the list about that. Yeah, the idea of the draft is to recommend behavior. So not to be neutral, but to say that it would be nice, good, etc., to actually do an X domain cut. It's not required. So most of the sentence, of the normative sentence in the draft use should, and I don't need to explain what is should when you compare to must or may. So today, in my opinion, this is clear, but okay, maybe some people disagree, we'll see. There have been some remarks that the draft was too implementation-oriented. Because, for instance, we have reference to trees. We talk about trees on tree operations, such as parent, descendant, etc. So I don't feel the need to apologize for this, because domain names are a tree, period. So if you cannot implement a tree-like operation in a DNS program, you have a problem anyway. So what we could do in the next version of the draft would be to make very clear that when we talk about a tree in the draft, it's a model that we use. It does not mean that it has to be the implementation in the memory of the server. Basically IETF anyway never standardize inner implementation. In your code, you do what you want. The only thing which is important is from the outside. So there was some text written by Sherman about this idea that it is a model, not an implementation. They are not in 01, the current version, but it could be added in 02. Third, the risk of security. It was not discussed in the last iteration in March, but it was discussed before, because, well, basically the idea is you send the spurious NX domain answer for .com, and then you delete completely .com. Basically, that's the idea. So one possible solution would be to limit NX domain cut only when the answer is validated, which is the case for .com because the root is signed, for instance. It is already implemented in Unbound. Today, NX domain cut in Unbound works this way. The NX domain has to be validated. On the other hand, well, one possible solution could be to add in the draft something like a resolver may decide to limit NX domain cut to validated DNSSEC validated answers. On the other hand, if you have DNSSEC, there is also maybe another possibility, which is to use aggressive synthesis of NX domain as proposed in the draft by Fujiwara and Kato. And well, this draft currently it's not adopted, so we cannot rely on it, but it's an interesting combination. NX domain cut when the domain is not validated, and when it is, when the NX domain is validated, you can even go further on synthesize NX domain. And the last one, the case of when there is an NX domain cut, but the resolver already add some information below the cut in its cache. Is it possible to send back these answers when there is a request? Of course, it's a bit surprising that you get an NX domain, then still send answers for below the cut, but on the other hand, the DNS never was fully consistent. It's eventually consistent. So it may seem, well, even if eventual consistency was mostly for the case of different servers, not from the same server, but still, While today in 01, there is nothing explicit. We could say that, for instance, a resolver may send already cached answers, even if it has received an X domain before. So in my opinion, these are the 4 issues that need a resolution, discussion on resolution. After that, if we solve this and put this in 02, well, is it ready, or is it another problem that I missed? Now, up to you.
Fighting to speak, Stefan.
We are eager to speak. Ted Lemon. So I don't really want to reiterate all of the things that I said on the mailing list because I think you captured them there, but I think that the fundamental issue here is, are we trying to clarify something about how the DNS works, or are we trying to specify new normative behavior? And the document as written specifies new normative behavior, and that's why there's so much controversy. If you were to just clarify that what an annex domain means is that that label and any labels under it don't exist, then there would be no controversy whatsoever. And so I would strongly encourage you to limit what you try to do to that one thing, and then you won't have to argue anymore.
One legal point, currently the draft claims to update 1034 on 2306. In the case of 1034, it's, in my opinion, a clarification, because I think that 1034 was clear on that already, but never clear enough for people. In the case of 2308, it's a real update, because there is an unfortunate sentence in 2308 that seems to forbid an X domain cut. So in that case, it's a real update on a real modification.
Yep, that makes sense.
David Lawrence, I just wanted to say that we actually have a lot of experience already with this whole eventual consistency idea. And so I would say that it should be limited to that rather than making a resolver do more work to find out if the state of names above it have changed some way. As a quick example, bind 9, you may be very familiar with it being, you know, the first server that kind of aggressively insisted that a CNAME not exist at a node with other data. However, in the cache it can. If you ask for an A record and get one, and then later somebody comes along and asks for a quad A record, but in that intervening time, the authority has changed it to a CNAME, well, until the A record actually times out of the cache, you will continue to get the A record instead of the CNAME. So the eventual consistency, I think, is good enough for these purposes.
So for the 4th item, would you be happy with a resolver may send a cached response even if it received the NX domain above?
Yes, until its TTL expires, of course.
Of course.
Paul Hoffman, I definitely thank you, David. And to disagree with something that Ted said about, you know, that something doesn't exist. The problem is it does exist in the cache. That is what the cache believes. And saying it doesn't exist unless you do something more, I think is insane. So yeah, just say may. And I think I will do a review on some of the language to tone it down, because some of your shoulds, in fact, need, so we all know what must means. Most people don't know what should means. Should means must except how I describe it. And there's a bunch of holes there, which you might then turn into either may or is a good idea. Meaning, like, you can really do whatever you want. This seems to be the preferred way, or even not just preferred like we would like you to, but sort of architecturally consistent way. So I'll send some edits on that after you do the O2.
Dan York, relaying for Americ Vavruza, says dig acom.aka.dns.net returns NX domain. If resolvers abide by this, the whole Akamai DNS will be off. QNAME minimization will stumble upon that record. To which Dave then wrote, for what it's worth, under the in a signed zone constraint, it would work with Akamai. Our problem is limited to unsigned zones.
Yeah, it's the same problem. It's one of the links between this work on QNAME minimization. In both cases, if you have, for instance, a name server that is broken on ENT, in both cases, we have a problem. But when you have broken servers, we have problems.
Shimon Hakbarasign. So I think one thing that was mentioned during that long train of 100 messages or so was, and that is not currently in the draft, is the option of performing the NX domain operation only on a cache miss. Because even for cache implementations that are not tree-like, this can be done efficiently, because on a cache miss, you would have had to perform an upward search of the tree anyway to find the resolver to which you would send the outbound queries. So I think probably that option should be discussed explicitly in the draft. Today it says, actually I couldn't remember what it said until I read it today, but section 2 says should do this. And only in a later section, I think section 5, it says, however, if you have a good reason to ignore this advice because your cache implementation is not a tree, then you can just ignore this whole document. But I think there's a step in between that is a reasonable implementation option that could be discussed.
But isn't it the same as, for instance, it's the fourth case, the case where there is a cache response, which is a
right,
cache
yeah.
hit.
So
it's exactly the same case, no?
It is the same as this fourth case. What I'm pointing out that it isn't currently in the document. Okay.
It is implicit, with me. It is in my head, but not in the document.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, it was also implicit in my head, but I think it needs to be called out.
It sounds like it should go into the 02 document. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the chairs were figuring that the authors will do a 02 version with these comments plus a few others, and then we'd take it back to the list and see what happens, and then from there go to a working group last call. Does that sound along with the authors?
Cooked, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That's clear.
Okay.
I just remembered, I had another comment. So the implementation sections, they talk about the implementations, but they have a comment saying remove before publication. So is that actually a requirement from the RFC editor? Because I think it would be useful to continue to have some information about the implementations that were available at the time of publication of this.
No, but the idea is that you never modify a RFC once it is published, and it can last a long time.
Sure,
so
yeah.
an implementation status section is always outdated.
I know, but it can say at the time of publication of this document, these were the known implementations.
Or it can be moved to into appendix, which has sort of less veracity. There's still, yeah.
This will have to be discussed with the RFC editor. I'm not sure of the policy.
We can,
yeah, that's why I asked
okay.
whether it's a requirement or not.
Okay. Cool, thank you. One more, where's it? I know. Usually I figure we are with this new stuff. So, Dwayne, you're doing good.
So to give an update on EDNS key tag, in case you weren't here before, in case you forgot, this is a method by which validating recursive name servers or sub-resolvers can report their trust anchors in the form of key tags to zone operators. And the idea is to provide data to zone operators during things like key rollovers and that kind of thing. So the draft as written was modeled after RFC 6975, which signals algorithm support in the same way via EDNS 0 options. Again, just a reminder, so how this works is you would send such signaling from a stub or from a recursive, you only send this in query messages, not in response messages. You would send it when the query type was a DNS key query. If you have a configured trust anchor, you should send it. If you have some cached DS records, you may send it, but you must not send it otherwise. So since the last meeting, IETF94, this was adopted by the working group and published as 00 under the working group name. There was some discussion on the list. It was then published as 01. Really, the only significant change between 00 and 01 is in 00, there was this idea that if you were forwarding key tags from a stub, you should do a union of the recursive key tags with the stub's key tags and then send the union. But that was changed to be, that was changed from intersection to union. So at this point, there's kind of only one open question, which is some people are uncomfortable with the idea of doing the signaling in EDNS 0, and there have been proposals to do it as a separate query, putting the key tags in a query name instead. So here's how it would look in EDNS 0. You would have this option with some number of key tag values. And if you were doing something like forwarding key tags from somebody downstream, whoa. Is that the end of the slides?
I think that's the last slide I have to use.
Oh, that's too bad.
Hold on. Let me see. Let me see.
Couple more on the one on the materials.
Is there?
Well, I'll just imagine you can see it on screen.
Here we go.
Oh yeah, they're down at the bottom.
Yep.
Can you?
Yep.
All right.
So, oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
That one.
So the idea in the current draft is that if you are forwarding key tags from somebody downstream, you would repeat the option multiple times in the message. So there would be two EDNS key tag options with separate lists, and then that could sort of maybe tell you something additional about when you're looking at the data. So I asked this question on the mailing list whether to do the signaling in EDNS 0 or with the QName, and there was only one vote, a vote for QName encoding from Mark Andrews, and he had said that he's already got an experimental branch of Bind that does this, and he does it with the QName _TA-XXXX, where that's a hex encoded key tag value. So for the root zone today, it would be _TA-4A5C. Query type would be null. It wasn't perfectly clear to me from Mark's message how you would do multiple key tags, but I imagine something like a comma separated list or something like that. Mark doesn't like commas apparently, so just smash them together. That wouldn't be my choice, but whatever. So this is really, I think, the outstanding discussion item at this point, and I'd like input either now if there's time or on the mailing list.
Yeah, there's time now.
Yeah.
So
Or actually ahead.
Warren.
Oh, by the way, Warren's a co-author now, co-conspirator now.
Yeah. So Warren Kumari, I was one of the authors on a sort of different document, earlier document, which had it encoded in the QName. And one of the issues that we discovered is if there is a forwarder which is unaware of this sort of thing, and a client is, the client might put this in, send it through the forwarder would send it off to whoever collects this, and would make it look as though, the machine it was forwarded through actually has the new key tag. So that was sort of one of the reasons why myself and whoever else was, I think Roy was one of the authors. We sort of looked at that for a while, and then we came up with things like every time a name server starts, it creates a UUID and puts that in so you can disambiguate them, and then it got even more complex and we became concerned and ran away.
Go ahead, since you're responding to this.
It doesn't need to be complicated. We just want to know, basically, when we're doing this, we want to know the set of clients out there, basically, that understand things. We don't need to know their IP address or lots of other stuff. We just want to know which algorithms are actually in the trust anchors. So it doesn't matter if it all comes through the same IP address. That's an irrelevancy in terms of what we're doing here. If we're doing it as EDNS option, it's still an irrelevancy because you're going to be getting it from the recursive server's IP address, not the client's IP address anyway.
Yeah, I disagree a little bit. I think the IP address data is useful from a consuming point of view. I mean, you want to sort of do some sanity checks, but yeah.
So Paul Hoffman, to respond to something that Mark said, the one word is we want, or it's a multiple word, but the most important part I will emphasize is we want to know. That is, this is not just data we want to be sending around the DNS. The reason why we're thinking of adding this is there are people who will possibly make decisions based on this. So finding that information, having it show up in places where we can look at it and evaluate it would be important. And given that, I do have the same concern about having an idea whether it is a large recursor that we recognize, possibly because it's, for example, if I'm running either a busy TLD or a root zone, I can recognize what a big recursor is because it's asking me a lot of sensible questions. I can also recognize what a small recursor is because it asks me exactly once every 2 weeks for interesting information. And given that, I think I have a preference towards doing an EDNS 0 option, but I think it needs much more discussion before we lock it down.
Ed Lewis. I also prefer the EDNS 0, but I would have to say when saying this is just reaction, why hex? Because everywhere else I see this key tag is in decimal. And I don't want to have one more reason to get confused about what key we're talking about.
Why the reason it was hex rather than decimal is that it's compact and you can shove them right next to each other. You don't need extra bits of syntactic goo to separate the values.
I can see why for the protocol engineering you want to do that, but for an operator, that's not, yeah. I mean, you can use anything else, use a plus sign, separate them the other way, but please don't confuse us with what key it is.
So one thing that I worry about a lot, Ed, is as you probably know from, anytime you look at data that comes in the root servers, it's just amazing the stuff that's in there. And so I would like to be able to sort of differentiate a legitimate signal versus an accidental signal. And so that's one of the reasons why I like the commas, for example. If we don't have that, then something that happens to match this might be confused for a legitimate trust anchor. So I'm all for adding more things to the structure of the query name that helps us identify legitimate versus accidental signals.
I say certainly. I have other reservations about how would I actually trust, how would I really believe this data coming in, adding to that. But also the question was, don't just give me yet a different way of, that's what the.
Okay.
Evan Hunt, ISC. I think I was co-author with Warren on the one that encoded his QNAME, and I still favor that approach. I agree with that about the hexadecimal. I think that was overly clever. I recommended decimal with punctuation separating the key tags, or even using separate labels, but separate labels has the problem of QNAME minimization, eluding some of the data that you wanted. My general comment here is that I'm not sure whether the current draft has a clear statement of what the goal is, what data we want to acquire. But I think we should do what is minimal and can be deployed fastest in order to meet the goal that we specifically have. And I think that QNAME does meet the goal that we specifically have without us having to upgrade all of the resolvers and forwarders that are between us and the root, so that they will understand the key tag and pass it along. If you use a QNAME, you don't have to upgrade anything. The QNAME is just going to get passed along. It's very, very easy to collect the statistics and very, very easy to get the answer that I think we're looking for, unless we're looking for an answer that I didn't realize that we were looking for that, in which case I should sit down and shut up.
Okay, thanks.
Lars Lehmann from NetNode. Hexadecimal is to me a presentation thing. The thing that gets encoded on a wire should make technical sense. The thing that gets presented to the user should make human sense. The layer in between is called software. So please standardize for what's sensible for the wire.
Okay, there's something there. Does it make sense to do a hum or anything like that? That's what I was just thinking of. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to ask you if you're getting what you need here.
I think.
Well, I didn't really hear anyone. Maybe one person advocated for EDNS, but.
Let's do a hum on EDNS versus QNAME versus unclear.
Go away.
Yeah, go away sort of thing. Oh,
Tim, there's also one other thing. We could do QNAME initially and migrate to the other over time. This doesn't have to be a binary decision.
Has such a thing ever happened in the DNS?
Yeah. So that's what we'll do. We'll do 3 different hums. We'll do a hum on whether or not you like the EDNS 0 option or the next one on the Q name, and then a third one, like just go away, guys. Oh, before I start, Warren.
So I guess let me try and quickly do a clarification on which thing provides the info in which version. If you have the EDNS one, it's the recursive that sends the query to the trust point. If you have QName, it's machines behind potentially the machine which sends the thing. So you're measuring, I think, two different sets of things. Potentially it's not QName versus EDNS. Potentially it's QName versus EDNS or both, depending on what you actually want to measure. Right? They give you very different sets of views. So what exactly we're trying to measure is actually an important thing for which one to choose.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't see them as that. I mean, I think there are some differences, but I think overall you get the same data. I mean, they're designed so that you get the trust anchor key tags from both recursive and the stubs and the end machines, but you get them in sort of different ways.
Presumably, if the Evan Hunt again. Presumably, if you are validating stub and you are passing your queries through a validating resolver, then the queries would be sent from both. Although there is a potential that a QName would have been cached by the validating resolver, so you would be hiding the stub. On the other hand, if you were passing your queries from a validating stub through a non-validating resolver, then you would be finding out that there was a query from a stub. It would look the same. It comes down to, again, I think we need to have a really clear understanding of what question it is we're trying to answer before we really know which approach is best.
So I guess one last try before I give up on this. So more concrete examples, let's take 4.2.2.2, large recursive resolver, lots of people use it. If it is not upgraded to support this, and I run a validating resolver on my stub machine, which happens to forward through that, it will make it appear as though 4.2.2.2 has the new key tag. You know, one query from me will hit it. It doesn't know about this. It will just forward it on like anything else. That will make it appear to people who are measuring the data, if they're collecting the data, that 4.2.2.2 supports this and has the new, has the latest key. That was the only concern.
Okay.
Tim, I've heard a lot of questions and confusion. I think it might be premature to ask this now. I would like to see, and I do not want to slow this down. I'm one of the people for whom this is a very pointy stick. But I would like to see lots of discussion on the list, not long discussion, but lots of discussion in a short period of time. And then can you ask the question of A plus B, 0?
Oh, so it sounds like holding off on the hums until we kind of hash it out more on the list is what Paul's saying. Can we just ask the room? Oh, about not doing it. So,
go to the microphone. What do you suggest?
Yeah.
Well, it's been adopted by the working group, so.
Yeah, but
we can still kill it.
Okay.
The one question we can ask: should we kill this effort because nobody has any clue what's going on? And the value of the experiment may be very low.
So, okay, let's do this hum. Should we continue with this work? Let's hum for yes. Should we kill this work? You could hum for now if you want to kill this work. Okay. So I think we're going to continue, but Paul's point's good. Is we should hash this out on the list about the QName versus the EDNS option and come to some sort of rough consensus on that.
All right.
Go.
All over again, Tim. Can I ask you or Wayne to ask explicitly on the mailing list the questions?
Yes.
That you want answers to?
Yes, I will put together the questions. We'll sit down and sort of put together the questions and send that off and have start that discussion that way. How's that sound?
Sounds great.
Okay. If the minute takers could put a note in there to kick me. Okay. Thanks.
Yes. He likes it. Yeah, so we are actually running ahead on time, and in the interest of making the best use of what we have, we were looking at new business.
Before that, just while you're figuring out what to do for new business, a note for the room. If you care about NSEC 5, there's going to be a presentation about it tomorrow in SAG. So that's why I'm saying it now. If you want to go to the presentation, there's a short presentation on NSEC 5 tomorrow. You probably wouldn't have known about it otherwise. I'm not advertising, just announcing.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, that's good to know. We had also looked at who's scheduled for our next block of agenda time on Friday and who was in the room here, because we sort of ended up juggling fairly carefully. But Shane, if you were ready to do the HTTP draft, we can fit that in, I think. And thank you for being flexible.
Great, thank you. So I know this is supposed to be stuff that's already being discussed by the working group, but I want to do a quick introduction into some work that we've been doing about DNS over HTTP. So this is not just myself. I've also been doing this with my colleague, Davey at BII, and another one of my colleagues who's not here today, Arun Shah, and of course, the famous Paul Vixie.
Of Paul Vixie.
Well, exactly. That's Paul Vixie of Paul Vixie. He has many hats. I don't know. I didn't know which one, so I gave him his own hat. So we've actually got 2 drafts in this area. The first one is a kind of survey of all the different techniques that you can use. I'm sure I didn't get all of them, but I tried to go through a lot of them. And the intention of this is just to be informational, so that people who are thinking about designing a new way of doing DNS over HTTP or looking for ways to use this will have a place to start to get a kind of view, a high-level view of the different techniques that you can use. The next document is, we call it a wire format document. It covers one specific implementation, which is the one that we've used. And we think that this could be standards track, but of course it's not required, and we can talk about that in a minute. So the first document, like I said, it's a high-level view of the different approaches you could take, and it's structured from the things that look the most like DNS, which is actually DNS wire format over port 80, just picking a different port, all the way to the ones that look most like the web, which are RESTful DNS APIs, like the one that Google just announced a few days ago. Yeah. So we've had a little bit of feedback on this, thanks to Jinmei and Stefan for this. And likely there'll be one more draft with minor updates, but because it's such a high-level document, I don't really expect a lot more updates with it. But of course, if you have some criticism or want any changes, just let me know. The next one is a lot more detailed, and this is the document which describes the DNS over HTTP wire format. We actually have two interoperable implementations for this. One which is a plugin for Nginx, I think, and one which is a Go language implementation. So the idea here is the protocol is actually very, very simple. It just takes the wire format DNS message and throws it as a binary blob using HTTP. We use a post message for this. We'll discuss that in a minute. Yeah, that's basically it. We have a couple of headers that we defined for this. We just use the octet stream, although I noticed yesterday that it's not actually in the draft, so we need to put that in there. And then we have one signaling flag, which is specifying whether the transport is UDP and TCP. This is because of the implementation models. It's a bit weird, but yeah, we have 2 different scenarios that we envision for this. One is where people use it in a proxy mode. So it's very, very similar to, I think, the work that's been done already for DNS over TLS. You want to kind of VPN. So in that case, you're kind of acting as a proxy. And that's the mode where using this signaling for UDP or TCP becomes important, because the stub client behind it needs for the proxy to act like a real DNS server. So you want to get, the simplest way to do that is just to ask for the messages in the right format from the DNS server. So in this mode, it's a kind of drop-in support for the protocol. And then we also have an option of doing what I call direct mode. And this is where either the DNS server itself speaks HTTP, and I'm not sure that's really useful, and it may be a little bit scary, but more useful may be that applications may speak this protocol directly. That can be a little more efficient in the truncation case, for example.
So it might be something that we might look at adding for the Get DNS API, for example. So we've had a bit of discussion about this on the list. We think we've addressed most of the stuff. One is there was some concern, I think Paul Hoffman raised it, but I could be wrong, about using post versus get. Since conceptually you're just doing a lookup, which seems to be closer to a get. We find there's a lot of other prior history of using a post for this, so it seems like it's a closer match for what we're actually doing, just throwing binary blobs around. There was also some suggestion that we mentioned that it's only useful in this proxy mode, but someone said you could use it for web development. I hesitate to put much text in about that because while yes, you could use this in a JavaScript library or something, the overhead and pain of like constructing binary DNS objects seems just incredibly crazy. So I don't know. We also document that you always specify the flag, whether it's UDP or TCP, just for simplicity and consistency. We tried to clarify twice that you don't need the 2-byte header for TCP length because it's HTTP and we already know the length. It may still not be clear, in which case I give up and someone else has to write the text. I expanded the security section quite a bit. Originally, it kind of said, nah, there's nothing really to worry about. Unfortunately, I'm not really sure of a good way to do that because the real security concerns are, well, any problem with DNS or any problem with HTTP, or if using HTTPS, any problem with TLS could all be a problem here. And there may be new ones, which I can't really think of. So I couldn't find any documents to reference, like what's all of best practices for DNS. I don't know what to put there. Another suggestion was that we use the .well-known URI scheme. I'm not sure if that's a good idea or not. I know it's a standard. I don't know if the uptake is that great. It doesn't hurt to put it in there, so we did that for this version. And that's it. Thanks to a couple of people who've given us a lot of useful feedback. So that's where we're at now. Just a quick note, I'm not going to talk to this slide, but we did do some performance tests and we posted them. It actually looks quite good. One thing that's interesting is that TLS performance, native TLS performance for the DNS software we tried was actually really bad, worse than HTTP. Anyway, so should we adopt it? I would like to see at least the wire format document adapted. I think the survey document, I don't really mind. I think it would be nice if it was a DNS op working group document, but it's intended as an informational document. I don't mind doing it as an independent submission. So I would like the working group to adopt it, but I'm not going to push too hard for it. The wire format document, I think it would be a much stronger document if it was a DNS op document. I'd be very pleased if it was adopted by the working group. However, I recognize that there wasn't a lot of pre-discussion about possible formats for DNS over HTTP, and we did kind of jump in and present one solution. So I can understand that there may be some concern about adopting it from that point of view. And ultimately, could be informational, could be standards track. I think either way is fine. Although I do think that we have, like I said, 2 independent interoperable implementations. So I think it wouldn't be weird to have it as a standards track document, except for maybe signaling that this is a generally good idea where I think it's an interesting and useful technique, but only in specific cases. So anyway,
Maybe more experimental initially?
Experimental, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
You know, we can, I figure we can, Paul may speak.
Yeah, let's hear some comments and we'll proceed.
I'm sorry, Suze, did you want to say something?
No, I'm suggesting we should hear comments, reactions before we get bogged down in a process discussion.
Right. So I would like to see both of them adopted. I see no reason not to do the informational survey in this group because it's people in this group who've had that idea, you know, on a whiteboard. And so that would be the people who I would want to review that document. So I think that would be fine. Going back 2 slides, I was the one who brought up post versus get, and I admit that I thought of post versus get because I was thinking of my model, which was not the binary one, and I was like, no, you should do this, and I realized, no, I should do that, not you. So I'm fine with if you're doing the binary one to do a post with a body. Get with a body is known to like really invoke a lot of tears.
It's supposed to work, but it's also known not to always work.
I would strongly like you to do the well-known and change the name slightly, because someone else might want to do a DNS over HTTP that is using GET and JSON and things that an application might want.
Absolutely.
So
okay.
if you wanted to get rid of your second bullet because you don't want someone in JavaScript to be putting together a DNS packet, I agree, you really, really don't, then I would say somebody else, such as me, might come do some of the legwork as well, do it a different way, and and only look at that group. So, but I still, and to me, that is a strong argument also for doing the survey document as well.
Okay.
Okay.
That makes that all makes
So just
complete sense.
if you're going to use the well-known, don't make it like money. Do it as something a little bit more generic, and I might do a follow-on.
That makes sense.
Sure. Just as a point of order, I'm closing the mic lines because we have now solved our time problem.
You're welcome.
I'm John Levine. I mean, this is a disgusting crock, but it solves a real problem, and I would like it to be no. Well, what else is new? Having written production DNS servers in pure Perl, I do not share Paul's concern about writing this stuff in JavaScript, and no, basically, if we can put this on the standards track, and this will allow people to write 1 or 2 JavaScript libraries that will actually work to look up an SRV record, that would be great. So I think standards track is appropriate, and I would like to see us work on it.
Okay.
Christian?
Christian Wittem, Microsoft. Well, standards track, it's probably appropriate. I don't really want. My problem with the security section is that there is a known issue there, which is what happens if someone uses that within an enterprise network. Because that particular construct will go across the firewall just fine, and will let you, say, browse your porn site from your office desk, despite the best attempt of your IT managers to block the resolution of those domain names. Now,
I'm quite willing to add text, or even better, copy paste whatever you send as recommendations for security considerations for enterprises. Yeah, I agree. It can be a concern in a similar way to the entire work of the deprive group. So yeah.
Yeah. Also, that's the other remark is that this is extremely close to what's happening in deprive, and we may want to synchronize.
Yeah. Dan's got a comment from Jabber, it looks like, and then I'll get to Johan.
I do. Dan York, channeling Merrick. Question, what made you go with transporting raw DNS messages then? The DNS wire to JSON transformation cost is dwarfed by the transport cost, and there's much more value for consumers to get quote unquote easy to read DNS contents.
I don't remember. I wasn't in any discussion. My guess is that Paul Vixie did this on an airplane flight in one of his transatlantic junkets, and just did it because it was easy.
Stefan's gonna.
Yeah, because I remember discussing it with you, and I remember your answer then. Which was that with the WAR system, you can pass any DNS request, any DNS option, anything. If you define a mapping, there's always the risk that some things, such as new DNS options, unknown queue types, etc., will be missing from the mapping. That was the idea.
That is true. That is true.
While I'm just here, I would like to beg your indulgence to also mention that at the hackathon this past weekend, Sarah Dickinson did an analysis of Google's new service offering this, and put her notes together in a PDF. It was in the hackathon slides. They will be available online. I'll send that link to the list too.
Okay, that'd be great.
I know we're short on time, but I'm going to take the opportunity and say that's actually a good example of one of the strengths of this approach versus using a RESTful API approach, which is that, for example, there's no way to do a validating resolver with the current Google API, and they may extend it to allow that possibility, but until that happens, it's not possible. Anyway, sorry. Yeah.
Lars Lehmann from NetNode. I'm going to be boring with 2 questions. The first one is, do we have a problem statement?
I'm sorry, I couldn't.
Do we have a problem statement?
There is a problem statement in the document.
Okay, fair enough. Because if we're going to make a working group thing out of it, we must be clear on what type of problem we're trying to solve here.
Yeah.
The second one is actually, is this DNSOP work? because to me this looks like a transport, a protocol mechanism. And maybe DNSOP has now turned into the
transport
basin
working group?
for all DNS work. And,
Yeah.
and if so, that's fine. But if it's not, then it might be better to put it somewhere else.
Yeah.
I don't know. These are just questions that pop up in my head.
I think until we hear otherwise from our AD or from somebody else, it's fine here. That's probably the short answer to that question. How's that? And since Joel has his head down, I'm taking silence as consent. Yeah. Okay.
Robert?
Robert Evans. On one of your slides, you used the content type application octet string. Is there any reason not to register the DNS wire message format in the MIME media type registry?
You mean for the content type?
Yes.
There's no reason. No, I think we're happy to do that.
Okay, because then you could use the HTTP content type negotiation.
So, well, actually, yeah, I'm not a web person, so that kind of thing scares me. I guess I'm not sure about what the behavior is. I just don't know what the behavior is of web servers and things like that if they encounter unknown content type. It'll be fine? Okay. Okay.
Applications that DNS already exist.
There's already a type. Okay. Okay.
Robert Martinez. I thought I wouldn't say this, but I agree with Microsoft. That's the security things. The security statement is not just a protocol issue, but also an intranet issue. I'm not really sure why we want to put everything on the internet on port 80, but I guess
because you block everything else.
Well, that might be a reason, right?
Keep your grubby hands off my packets.
Right. I don't think that should be our decision what they block. I mean, if people want to shoot themselves in the foot, I think they should be allowed to.
Fair enough.
And not with this draft, but by blocking port 53.
Yeah. Okay.
So thanks a lot, very much, Shane. Thanks, everybody. 3 things. Blue sheets. I think we only have one of them up here. If you haven't signed the other one, sign it and then bring it up here. For those of you who'll be here on Friday, we are doing session 2 Friday morning. We'll see you there. And if you're not, safe travels home, and we'll take all of these things back to the list and see you there.
Okay.
This is yours.